Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Assalamu alaikum everyone and welcome to Muslim Neighborhood Nexus. It's so nice to see all of you here as families together, alhamdulillah. And thank you for taking time out on a weekend, on a good summer day. We have a few weekends left during summer. This is the first program of a series of programs we're doing that are going to be focusing on a healthy Islamic family. This one's focused on success in school for parents and kids. We are going to have other programs once a month, inshallah, focusing on parenting and other topics linked with this. So please keep an eye out on social media for our events. The second thing is, this is a 90-minute program, inshallah. We have snacks being served, so feel free to go get the snacks during the event, inshallah. The second thing is we're encouraging families to sit together so we could have a productive discussion. Anyone who has a kid or a child less than 11 years old, grade 7, grade 6 or below, we have a separate children program happening in the Mom and Tot room. Then we'll take the kids outside too. So please, we only want to focus on kids grade 7 to 12, inshallah, for this program. The last thing is we do have some handouts. So if your family has not had a handout given to them, please come and take one handout per family along with a clipboard and pen. And inshallah, we'll have Q&A at the end. Right, bro? Jazakallah. So over to Brother Omar Zia. Jazakallah.
Assalamu alaikum, everybody. It's my pleasure to be here with all of you today. Can everybody hear me okay? Feels awkward with this, with this on my face. So thank you for joining us here today. I really appreciate everybody's attendance. I'm really happy to see that we have parents with their children today. So I hope that as a family, whatever I'm able to share with you all today, you're able to take back as a family in review. There is homework. It's on your handout, actually. So this is like being in school. So parents have homework and kids have homework on that sheet as well. So please try to follow along the worksheet as we go through. Just before we get started, a bit about who I am. So I'm Omar Zia. I'm the principal at the Woodland School in Mississauga. I've been with the Appeal Board for 23 years now. And I've been a vice principal, obviously. But before that, I spent a decade as a guidance counselor, helping students figure out their path in life, figuring out courses and career choices, as well as helping them with their mental and physical health and well-being. Before that, I taught English, science, special education, and ESL, and I've taught everywhere from John Fraser, not too far from here, all the way to Bramley Secondary School, TL Kennedy School, Streetsville, which is also not too far from here. I've been a resource teacher for Glen Forest, for Lauren Park, Clarkson, so a lot of Mississauga. So I hope, inshallah, that you can benefit from the experiences that I have had, and that's why I'm here today to share those experiences with you. The advice I've given to students and to teachers and to families over a long period of time. And I'd like to also mention that my own family is here today as well, meaning that I'm not perfect. Like yourselves as parents, we are growing, we're developing, and as we grow and develop and we learn, we do so together. And so I hope that, inshallah, you're able to benefit from this as my own family is benefiting from it as well today. My email address is available on the screen, but also on your worksheet. So if we do not have a chance to get through all the questions and answers today, or you have some thoughts later on you want to run by me, or you need some support, some specific support for your child, feel free to reach out to me. My email address is there. I'm available by email. That's the easiest and best way to get in touch with me. So to get started, what we're going to be talking about, we're going to be starting with something called PAIF. I'll explain what that is shortly. The triangle model of education. We're talking about identity, character, growing success, which is the assessment policy in Ontario, how students earn their marks and earn their grades. We're talking about work ethic, which is some practical strategies on how we can actually study. And then, of course, the homework, as I mentioned earlier. The reason I chose these areas to focus on is from the feedback I received from the survey that went out, I think it was yesterday or the day before. So I was able to go through that yesterday and tailor-make this workshop based on the survey results that many of you participated in. So thank you for providing that feedback. Otherwise, I might be here presenting something and it's not relevant to you. So I hope, inshallah, that this is relevant to you as we go through. So before we begin, I want to ask who's in the room. So I would like to ask, how many people were born here? So here's an idea how many people are born here, and how many people went to school here? Of course, all the kids are raising their hands, but I see some adults as well. How many here are already a university or college graduate? Okay. How many people here have a postgraduate, like a master's or a PhD? And how many have a professional designation like a CPA or MD or LBA, OCT? I'll show a lot of hands up, which is great. How many people here had a 90% plus average when they went to high school? So we see a few hands going up. Anybody get 100%? It's important to measure our expectations, I suppose. How many here have built their own house on Minecraft? How many people have built their own city in SimCity? I don't see any adult hands going up, maybe mine. Okay. How many people here were born before 1995? Why is that such an important year, 1995? Anybody know? What happened in that year? Year of the Internet. Year of the Internet. How many people here were born after 2008? Something at the kids. Why is 2008 such an important year? What happened in that year? Which phone? The iPhone, the smartphone finally came out in that year. So if your hands went up, that means that these kids were born in the era. They were born with a smartphone in their hands, so to speak, right? It was part of what they grew up with. So the reason that I ask these questions is for us to understand where we're all coming from as you look around the room, to share some perspective that we may have in common, but also more importantly for us to be able to measure our expectations. It's far different to expect social media and video game control from someone born before 2008 versus someone who was born after 2008 with a cell phone in their hand. Right? It's far more easier to have expectations of a child before 1995, before the era of the internet, versus after 1995 where kids were born into the internet. It's important for us to measure those expectations. As we raise our hands around our professional designations, it's very important for us to measure that with what we expect from our own children as well. So PAFE stands for Parent as First Educator. And this is a very important concept when it comes to the education of our kids. And we think about the education system in this province and really around the world itself. So a question I want to ask is, if a parent is their first educator, what are some of the first things that a parent can only do? What are some of the things that parents teach their children? So moral values, what else? Language, what else? Work ethic, what else? Religion. We start with the Shahada when our children are born, right? What else do we teach our children? Only parents do this. Manners. Behavior. Activities they're living, discipline, and world views, politics, economics. Okay, so parents do a lot of first things. How many parents taught their kids how to tie their shoelaces? How many parents taught their kids how to ride a bike? How many parents taught their kids how to throw a ball, football, basketball, whatever, right? These are also aspects. How many parents taught their kids how to read? Or do we leave that to school? I didn't see a lot of hands going up. I saw a couple hands going up, right? How many people taught their kids the alphabet? How many taught them the numbers? Any parent here taught their kid the quadratic formula? How's there being a teacher, I guess, right? Okay. The reason this is so important is for us to understand a very simple concept about education itself. One of our social activists in our community amongst the Muslims from a while ago, Brother Malcolm X, otherwise known as Al-Malik Al-Hajj Al-Shabazz, he made a very profound statement. He said that in the struggle for human rights, education is the cornerstone and the key for every family and every community, because the future belongs to those who prepare for it today. The future belongs to those who prepare for it today. So education has to be something that is very important for us as individuals, as humans, especially as Muslims living in this land. We're going through a lot of Islamophobia. We are victims of Islamophobia in the media and in schools, at workplaces, in the law itself, in politics. Why? Because we as a community are lagging behind when it comes to educating ourselves in terms of getting involved in society into key positions where we can make those differences in the world, not for human beings altogether, but for Muslims specifically, for our ummah. So as we go through this presentation, and as we raise our kids in education, it is so important that we teach them how to get involved in our society and how to make a difference in stamping out racism, Islamophobia, that hurt our own struggles with education itself. Some of you are aware of what's been happening in Peel region. The Peel board is under a ministry review. Our trustees have been defunct. We have a supervisor. Why? Because for too long, we have not been giving rights to black families and to black students, to indigenous families and indigenous students, and yes, Muslim students and Muslim families are also part of the ministry report. Right? It's actually Islamophobia is mentioned by name in that ministry report. As a result of that ministry report, we now have a Muslim-specific coordinator at the board. And now we have 2 Muslim-specific research, not in research, but also as resource teachers in the board coming up. The reason for this is because we as a board recognized that Muslims as a community need to become more engaged in education. And that's part of the big reason why I'm here as a principal to share this information with us as a community, so we take the time to get involved. Okay, so planning for the future. As we said, the future belongs to those who prepare for today. Before we begin, we want to talk about the parenting aspect of this. I'm asking, what was the advice of Ali ibn Abi Talib when it comes to parenting? Anybody know? Sorry? No, he made a very profound statement, Ali ibn Abi Talib. He's about parenting itself. He said, do not parent your children the way that you were parented, because they are born for a different time. Do not parent your children the way that you were parented, because they were born for a different time. So we're living in 2022, almost 2023. It means that we as parents have to understand how to engage our kids in a way that benefits them in this day and age. So question, what defines success for our children? I'm asking. Sorry? Improvements? Okay, so improving themselves. What else? A career? Graduating from high school? Being happy with life? Become better Muslims and better people? A college diploma or a university degree? A good job? Sorry? Character, right. Having good character. Good marriage, absolutely. So responsible Muslim and helpful for the community, so having good citizenship skills. Passion and compassion and being honest. So with good discipline and good habits. Excellent. So we're getting there. Alhamdulillah. You're saying all the things that I'm actually very thankful and very happy that you're mentioning these things. So what are some of the characteristics that are required for success? So of all these elements that we mentioned, having a good job, being a good Muslim, what are some of the specific characteristics that our kids need? Being hardworking, being able to focus, being self-motivated, planning ahead, having patience. So maybe a self-incentive system or positive reinforcements. Having self-discipline. Sorry? Having good time management skills. Being consistent in their approach with everything they do in life. Having commitment. Having higher goals or having higher expectations. MashaAllah, we're all on the right track. Alhamdulillah. The question is, we said all these wonderful things. Now the question is this, and I think people have already kind of figured it out and already answered this as well. Who has been entrusted with all of this? Parents. This is a responsibility that each one of us as an Amir and an Amira of the house carry forward with ourselves, right? We know the hadith of Prophet ﷺ has said that every parent is either an Amir or an Amira for their families, and so they have a responsibility that we're going to be held accountable on the day of resurrection. Why am I mentioning that in front of our children? It's because our children need to understand that our parents have a responsibility to take care of their children. Children's responsibility is what? Any child want to answer the question? Yep. To study, but before that, very simple. If parents are responsible and are accountable on a day of judgment for taking care of their children, what's the children's responsibility? To obey or to allow their parents to do their jobs. This is one of the biggest disconnects and frustrations that occur in households where parents are trying to do their job and kids are like, you're not cool enough, Dad. Okay, me when I was like 5 years old, you were cool. Mom, like you're just not with it anymore. What's with the hijab? I guess some new colors, right? The kids start developing this kind of weird personality, right? Nothing wrong with it. We've all been there. Believe it, as addressing the kids in this room, your parents have been there as well. I was there as well. I remember telling my father to his face, he's not cool, right? So it does happen, right? My children are laughing because they probably remember seeing my father talk about that. But it does happen. It's really part of what happens in life. But what we need to understand as children is that just as we allow our teachers to do their jobs at school, and we go to school to learn from our teachers, and we want to learn the quadratic formula, we want to learn Pythagoras' system, we want to learn about Snell's law and Newton's laws and Kepler's laws, we want to learn about character profiles, and we want to learn about literature studies, and we allow teachers to teach us. So we must, as children and as teenagers, as tweenagers, allow our parents to teach us as well. If we don't connect with our children, and if children do not allow parents to connect with them, we end up in a situation where life becomes a bit more difficult. So in 1970, here in Ontario, most kids went home to a parent after school. Almost 75% went home to one parent or grandparent at home. How many do you think do that today? Less than a quarter. 2015, less than a quarter. Almost 17% of kids go home to a family member, a parent or a grandparent. So what that means is that there's a bit of disconnect. Parents are working harder than they worked before, and now we have a situation where in most families, both parents are working, and in some situations, both parents are working multiple jobs to make ends meet. And as inflation increases right now here in the year 2022, I personally am aware at my own school that there are parents who have taken on a second job or a third job just to make ends meet. So what ends up happening is that parents are not necessarily connected with their kids on a regular basis. So to make up for it, we develop peculiar parenting strategies. And one of them you see here in the picture, we become what's called a helicopter parent. So we're never really around, but we're always kind of hovering over our kids, right? Daycares now have cameras. You can see you can tune into your child and look at them all day long on the camera in a daycare. We had our grade 9 first day of school, and we had 160 parents show up on that first day because they didn't want to let their kids go. So parents start to hover around their kids whenever they possibly can, without making that direct connection. What ends up happening with this helicopter parenting is that we start to see some neglect. We start to see some interesting habits. So we developed this thing called the blaming parent, where rather than focusing on the child, we start to blame the teacher. It's the teacher's fault that my child is not passing. It's the teacher's fault that my child is not paying attention. It's the teacher's fault that I'm not available to be there with my kids when they get home. We also have this problem. So even myself, if I look back to 1998, 1999, when I first started teaching, and I had a child who was failing, or not doing well in school, or not doing their homework, the parent immediately was on my side. Sorry, Mr. Zia, we'll make sure it gets rectified, no problem at all. But now, over 20 years later, all the blame is coming to the school. Child is not doing well, it must be the problem with the school. It must be the problem with the teacher. In fact, in June, I got a call from a parent saying, the way the teacher talks is too loud. My child cannot concentrate with such loud talking. It's the teacher's fault my child failed because they talk too loud. We come up with really strange excuses just to blame our teachers and our education system rather than recognizing the fact that we as parents have not been able to make that connection with our kids as much as we would have liked to. It's a danger or hazard living in society. We also developed this interesting habit where we make, I'll do it for you. I'll do it for you parent. To the point where we're even going to interviews on behalf of our children. So I'll share with you that I had a teacher being interviewed for a job, and I'm not joking to you, this was just last year in September, where their mother actually called me to let me know that they were going to be 5 minutes late, but please give them the job anyway, they're great teaching. Right? So even somebody who's like 24, 25 years old coming in for an interview, it actually happened to me where I got a call from someone's mother. We also have this kind where the parents make excuses for their children, right? They overslept, they stepped the wrong way, they forgot to brush their teeth before they left the house, they can't write the test today, sorry, right? So, and they can translate to kids as well, where I've shared this example in other workshops as well, where it was a grade 10 literacy test and a child did not show up for the literacy test. We called home as to why. It's because her hair wasn't done right. So therefore she couldn't come to school. So excuses. And you also have this kind of situation where some parents think so highly of their children that my child is special, they must be gifted, and therefore the schooling system is not worthy, it's not good enough for them, and then we start to blame the system. The purpose of sharing all of this information is that what happens with this style of parenting is that our children grow up with a sense of hopelessness, a sense of not knowing who they are, where they are going, because they feel that their parent is living the life for them. They have a loss of resiliency. They have a loss of the ability to solve problems in life. And they have a sense of self-entitlement. And I'll share with you that when I was at TL Kennedy, I had a new program starting for DED students, developmentally delayed students, and they're all younger teachers. I remember 2 teachers just started coming in late. Now, I was the department head of DED, but also guidance, so I was not always in the building where in their classrooms. When I came to know that they're coming to school late, I asked them, I said, you're coming to school late, the kids are waiting outside your class for 5 or 10 minutes before you're here, what's going on? They got angry with me. Oh, it's my right. I can come as late as I want to. And it's an odd situation, but this sense of self-entitlement is affecting even younger generations of teachers. So this is what I'm sharing with you is not made up stuff. This is all reality that is happening. So the question is, what do we do? How can we ensure that our children are successful, and how can we start to connect with the system of education for our kids? So I'm going to share with you a model of education based on the Education Act, so it's not something which is new. And that is first and foremost that students are at the center of everything that happens in a school. They are above the curriculum. This is how educators approach the classroom. They should be taking time, and they do take time to learn about who are the kids in front of them, to learn about who they are. It is a child's responsibility from grade 9 and on, even from grade 7 and up, to start to speak with the teacher and let them know who they are, what their needs are. And we'll talk about advocacy shortly. We have the parent in one corner, and we have the school in the other corner. Why is it so important to see that both the parent and the school are involved in this triangle? Is that the parent has a responsibility in the education of their child. Some of us have heard that expression, it takes a village to raise a child. But oftentimes as parents, we forget that we are the village for our child. In this model of education, the student will learn while the parent encourages, the student will achieve at school while the school evaluates, and parents and school have to support each other. Why I'm sharing this model of education with all of us here as parents is because oftentimes parents do not recognize or are not aware of the agency that parents have in the education system. As parents, you are partners in education of your children. Partners in education means that you should always and constantly be in contact with the teachers of your kids. You should know what's happening in the classroom. You have every right to know what curriculum is being taught, what resources are being used in the classroom. You have every right to communicate with your teachers on a regular basis, not 5 times a day, but every week, every couple of weeks, touching base with them, checking in with them. So we as parents are aware. I'm sharing this because I grew up in a time where my parents were immigrants. They didn't know they had to actually talk to the principal and they could actually talk to the teacher. Most parents wait till parent-teacher interview night before they even see the teacher. They never want to see the principal unless your child is in trouble. But parents do have the ability to be part of their child's education. And it's so important to understand that you do have that agency and that voice in the education system. If as a Muslim parent, Ramadan is coming up, and you want to know what the school is doing to celebrate or to recognize that Ramadan is coming up, you as a parent can call the principal and say, what's going on for Ramadan this year? Have you informed the teachers, especially the phys ed teachers, that my child will be fasting? Are you planning anything for the kids who are fasting during lunch hour to have a quiet space to sit? If you're concerned about having Salah or Jummah Salah in the school, pick up the phone, call the principal and ask them, do you have a Jummah Salah at your school? Do you have a Muslim Student Association at your school? As a parent, you have this right. It's not a privilege, it's a right that you have as parents. and teenagers and students who are here recognize that if something is happening to you, something's going wrong, you're being bullied, you're experiencing Islamophobia or some sort of racism, or you see something wrong happening in the school, inform your parents, tell them what's going on. And you work together with your advocacy, with this right that you have, to advocate for your rights to ensure you have success in all parts of your life. Because this model of education has three elements: building iman, building character, and academic excellence. These are the three parts of the triangle. If you look at the Agile Education Act, it talks about Judeo-Christian values. So yes, faith-based values, faith-based identity are part of the Education Act. That's why we can have an MSA. There are Christian fellowships at these schools. At my school, we even have a Sikh student association, right? So religious identity, faith-based identity is important, and is important as part of their development in a school setting. Oftentimes parents think, well, we just send them to school to study. But there are two parts of being a student. One is education, and the other is schooling. Education makes a living. You can go to university, get a job, get married, have a house, have kids, etc., etc. Education makes a living. But schooling makes the life. Iman and character matter. 2/3 versus a 1/3, because living a life and establishing a life and knowing how to live a life is equally, if not more important than the curriculum. So as parents, I invite all of us that when we look at the education of our kids, let us not only focus on the curriculum and the marks they bring home, but let us also think about what's happening to them at school. What are they experiencing? How are they learning how to be a male or a female at school? How are they learning how to be a Muslim at school? What are their interactions like? Are there Muslim teachers at school? What's the interaction with other Muslim kids and non-Muslim kids? Is there Islamophobia and bullying happening at school? What is my child being exposed to? How is their character being shaped and developed at school? Because school is a second home. They're there from 6 to 8 hours a day, maybe longer if they're involved in clubs and sports. So we need to be sure that iman and character are part of the education of our kids. Why is character so important? I'm asking. What did the Prophet ﷺ say about character? He summed up his entire risala, his entire messengership, his entire existence in one sentence. I came for no other reason than to perfect good character. That's Islam. So it's not necessarily about praying and fasting and so on. That's part of it. But character is what really matters. That is a Sahih Hadith in Musnad Ahmad if you're interested. So let's talk about iman and character first before we get into academic excellence. Okay? Let's start there, inshallah. So first, the apple does not fall far from the tree. So I'm not going to ask for hands. How many people here as families pray 5 times a day? Just think about that. Don't hands, no hands. How many parents are praying 5 times a day? How many parents go for Jummah every week? How many parents make Quran an essential part of their daily life or weekly life? How many parents make that part? How many families make that part of the family life? How many of us, as parents or as families, make Ramadan the best it could ever be? And I'm sure most of us do, because that's a big thing for us. How many of us fast on the day of Ashura? How many of us celebrate Hajj every year, even if we're not going for Hajj, recognizing it? How many of us make dua for ourselves and for others a daily part of our lives? And how many of us discuss the elements of the Muslim world around us, the genocides that are happening, the cultural genocides that are occurring all over the world, the colonization of some Muslim lands that is happening today, right? The refugees that are being forced out of their lands, the indigenous who are being forced from their lands, indigenous Muslims being forced from their lands. How many of us bring this into conversation in our daily lives? The reason I'm asking these questions is because oftentimes, as a principal or even as a guidance counselor or just a member of the community, I will get calls from parents frantic and worried. And I just had one just this week on Thursday that my child has a boyfriend. My child has a girlfriend. I caught my child looking at inappropriate images on the internet. I found my child smoking or vaping. I'll never forget when I was the night school principal at Bramley Secondary School in Brampton, and I found a kid sitting in the washroom right before break time, and he was selling drugs. He has nice packages all lined up in the back of the toilet, and I walked in. Of course, I had to call the police. But what I will not forget is the look of his father, his Muslim father, walking in that day to the school, shaking, because he was shocked that this is what his kid was up to. So what we do at home matters. And yes, when the kids were young, we were on them. But when they become teenagers, there seems to be a bit of a lax. So from a psychological perspective, I want us to understand as parents is that when our children become mukallaf, when they go through adolescence, and children, you already know this as well, it's like they're being reborn psychologically. When a child is 7 years old and you say to them, smoking is haram, don't do it, do they argue with you? When a child is 15 years old and you say smoking or marijuana is haram, it's halal in Canada but haram in Islam, right? Marijuana is haram, don't do it, what do you get? Why? Why did you say that? It's not haram. It's good for the insides, it's medicinal. There's good purposes for it. Because when children become mukallaf, the way they think is different. They think like an adult. It's like they're being reborn. So many of us have spent those first 10 to 12 years foundationally helping our kids understand what Islam is about. And when they become a teenager or a teenager, we have to do it again. We have to do it again. We have to reteach them the importance of salah. We have to reteach them the importance of Quran, making dua. Reteach them the importance of Ramadan. We have to reteach them the importance of having that relationship with their Lord and Creator. So for teens who are here and for students who are here, I hope that you understand what I'm saying. Hope that what I'm saying resonates with you. Because there are so many kids, when they become a high school student, they start to wonder about their faith-based identity. Sometimes hijabs come on, sometimes they go off. Sometimes the niqab comes on, sometimes the niqab goes off. Sometimes they have a beard, sometimes it's gone. Sometimes they say they're praying, then they don't pray. For example, Jummah at my school, alhamdulillah, we had about 85 students in the cafeteria, which is normal for my school, large number of Muslims. But of course, I caught 5 kids, Muslim kids, in the washroom vaping instead of coming for Jummah. Now their Jummah rights are revoked, right? So we have to be aware that our kids are constantly changing and the conversations have to keep happening. If we don't have those conversations, here's what we end up with. Kids not knowing who they are. Our children have a wide variety of influences. When parents were young, all the parents in this room, when we were at high school age, we didn't have the internet. We didn't have access to people who were in university or college, unless they were our siblings or our direct family members. We only had each other friends. All my friends were the same age as me, going to the same classes as me. That's what we had when we were parents. That's all we had access to. But kids, tweens, and teens these days, because of social media, because of Instagram and Snapchat and Discord and YouTube for that matter, they have access to all ages. So children who are 13, 14, 15, 16 years old are no longer being influenced only by their peers, parents and teachers. They're now being influenced by the 30-year-old on YouTube who's talking all sorts of fawahish, all sorts of evil things. Whether it comes to your gender identity, your sexual identity, your faith-based identity, whether you feel like a dog that day, they're all being influenced in a way that parents were never influenced before. So children have access to a thought pattern that is not indigenous to their age group. So think for a second of a 14-year-old, or a 12-year-old for that matter, or a 17-year-old, has access to people who are 25, 30, 35, 40, and they're being influenced by what they're saying. Movie stars, when we were young as parents, there was maybe the odd interview from a movie star about the movie they just did. But now, celebrities, movie stars, and musicians, they're posting all sorts of weird pictures of themselves all over the internet, smoking, vaping, and different types of clothing, sometimes no clothing, showing off their tattoos. We didn't have this when we were growing up as parents, but our kids are being influenced by this. There's no wonder why there's such a craze for tattoos amongst Muslim teens, specifically boys, right? So, I'm not saying it's happening here, but for us to be aware that this is why we have such an identity crisis for our kids. Awareness is the first step. Knowing is half the battle. What's the other half? Knowing is half the battle. Anybody with G.I. Joe? Anybody grow up like me, G.I. Joe? Doing it. Half the battle is knowing. Knowing is half the battle, and doing is the other half of the battle. If you take time to read those curriculum documents like I mentioned, you will see what your child will know, what your child will do. Knowing and doing. Meaning that we have to have conversations with our kids about what they're being exposed to and what's influencing them on a regular basis. That's Iman. Let's talk about character. You can take a quick read there. So when we look at how character develops, a lot of it develops on how we, as parents, support our kids. Here you see on one side, a mother is berating the professor. On the other side, the child is taking responsibility for their actions and what's happening in class. Which kind of child do you want to be for the children who are here? And as parents, what type of child are we raising? So for the kids here, which one would you rather be, Dim or Dash? As a parent, what am I role modeling? Do I double park every time I go somewhere? I'm driving a big fancy car and I drive and I take up 3 parking spots because my car is very fancy, driving a Corvette or something. That has an influence on how our kids grow up. It develops that sense of self-entitlement. As Muslims, part of our character is developing an aspect of sadaqah, of giving rather than taking, of empathy, ensuring those around us are taken care of first before we take for ourselves. This is the culture that I hope that we all want to have in our homes. How are we raising our children in a home? Do ladies eat first? Do kids eat first? What are we showing ourselves? What are we showing our kids? Or is it the man of the house who gets to eat first? It's a question. Because it will have an impact on how our kids develop and how they feel about themselves. If the father is the one eating first, then what does it say about the worth of our children and our wives or our mothers? It means something, right? We have to look at our deen, not necessarily just culture, right? Women and children first. This is part of our deen, part of being Muslim. So, to the fathers, and I remind myself as a father, what are we demonstrating in the household? So again, what kind of friend do we want to be, whether we're a student or we're a parent here, and how we're going to demonstrate that when we go out with family. Again, we live a life of sadaqah as Muslims. Our life is supposed to be about sadaqah, about giving and helping others. So when winter time comes along, what are we doing for our neighbors? What are we doing if we see somebody on the street who needs help? The elderly amongst us. Right? How are we teaching? If some of us are lucky enough to have grandparents around, how are we treating them in front of our children? And how are we developing that relationship between our children and their grandparents? Is it through a lens of sadaqah? So the reason all of this is important is because of this. The key element to success in life, and specifically also in school, is resiliency. Because as adults, we know that life is not perfect. Ups and downs in life all the time. Our children are going to spend time figuring that out, experiencing it as well. But resiliency is something that we teach as adults. When things don't go right, we bounce back from it. So if we're driving along, we get pulled over by a police officer, do we yell and scream and blame the police officer that, why did I have to be here right now? I'm only going 80 in a 60 zone, what's the big deal? Or do I take responsibility for it? How do I react when the police officer comes to the door? Am I yelling, screaming, and swearing? Or am I being decent and showing myself as a proper Muslim? Right? Life is not going to be perfect. So we as adults role model what to do when life doesn't work out perfectly. We as adults we work with our kids so they understand how to be like Dash and how to be like Dim, right? To make the right choice at the right time. So we as adults, I invite myself and invite all of us here as adults and as parents to take care of ourselves first and foremost as well as part of taking care of our children. And the way to do that, the way to show our resilience as adults is to show and to demonstrate to our children growth, our growth. So what I have learned to do, what I invite all of us here to do, is that when we sit together as a family, maybe one meal a day or after Salah, sit down and share stories. Stories about our lives as parents growing up. Maybe demonstrate to our kids in our own careers, perhaps, how we're developing stage to stage to stage. I remember my own father moving from the factory floor to supervisor, to manager of manufacturing, to manager of the company. It makes a difference when we share these stories with our kids because it shows resiliency and it shows ambition. It shows the initiative to want to succeed. So those characteristics we mentioned just a few moments ago, we demonstrate that through the stories that we share. And to our teenagers and students who are here, when your parents share those stories, learn from them. Ask for the same story over and over again if you want to. Learn from the honesty, the respect that your parents have earned. Learn from what your parents have developed in their own lives so that you can take those same characteristics and put them in your own life. Students, when you see your parents interacting with their friends, pay attention to the language. How do they talk with their friends? And take the best of that and use it with your own friends. How do your parents choose friends? Because choice of friends is so important when we get to high school. Who are your friends? Look at your parents' friends and find out how did your parents choose good friends and follow the same formula. When you see your parents cleaning the house, taking care of each other as husband and wife, as mother and father, look at that interaction and learn how you can support the love in the home and how you can support the family structure itself. Okay. How? So this is going to be the question everybody says. Okay. Great talk. Perfect. Okay. We get the idea. We got to be better. We have to do the best we can. But is there some sort of a curriculum that we can use for Iman and for character? How am I really going to actually build up the character of my child? And so I included a worksheet, the last sheet on your handout there. It's kind of sideways. And it outlines spices. Muslims love spices. At least most people do. Until you get older, you get heartburn, you can't have spices anymore. You need yogurt with everything. But when we talk about the spices model, there are several areas of development. First and foremost is social development. Does anybody know the advice given to us in the Quran by Allah about friendship? Because how to make a friend is actually in the Quran. Allah tells us how do you make a friend? Who do you choose as a friend? Anybody know the ayah? Do you know it? You don't? Okay. So in chapter, yep. Jazakallah khairan. I want a more specific ayah than that though. That's a perfect one, but I want something related to it. It's chapter 9, verse 119. Surah Tawbah. Ya ayyuhalladhina amanu taqullaha wa kunu ma'a as-sadiqin. O you who believe, have taqwa of Allah and surround yourselves, make friends with those who are as-sadiq. The brother mashallah gave us a better ayah because it talks about muttaqeen, those who have taqwa. This one is about sadiqeen. Who was as-sadiq? Abu Bakr as-Siddiq. Right? He was as-sadiq. So how do you choose a friend? You learn to find friends who are like Abu Bakr as-Siddiq. Maybe as a family work together, look up the biography of who this special person was. The first Khalifa of Islam, the best friend of our Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam. What was his character like? What was his manners, his morals like? Why was he his best friend? And how can we choose friends like that? Social interactions matter so much because who we interact with, who we spend our life with on this earth, is who we'll be resurrected with on the day of resurrection. As parents, we have to take a look at who our friends are. And are my friends, as a parent, what's the influence their children having on my kids? What's the influence I'm having or my children having on their kids? Social interactions start in the home. How do siblings interact with each other? How do adults and children interact with each other? How does parent and parent interact with each other? How does it sound like in our home? If someone were to walk by your home right now, not right now, but when you're at home, and listen in, what would the conversation sound like? Would it be yelling and screaming, or would it be calm and peaceful? Salam and sakina. What would our homes be like? Right? What would they sound like? What does it feel like to enter one of our homes? Do we feel welcome? Do we feel included? How do our children feel? Do they feel supported in that home? Do they feel they can talk about anything with their parents without fear of being judged? So these are the questions we have to ask ourselves with social development because it begins at home. Once children understand how we interact with each other at home, they then take that to the outside world. But in the outside world, there's lots of experimentation. They learn how to talk with their friends, and sometimes what happens with kids, and I've seen this again in the school, and kids, I think you know this as well, you talk one way at school and a different way at home. Sometimes at school we use some loose language, we use some inappropriate language sometimes, right? Don't worry, your parents did it too, it's okay. We've all done it. Your parents were your age too once, okay? We've all done it. But at home we talk a bit differently. We don't use the same language at home. Maybe we talk with one group of friends differently than with another group of friends. This is all part of our growing, learning, and development. Parents need to have conversation with their kids. We as parents have to have conversation with our children about who they're hanging out with at school. Get to know who they are. Learn about where they're coming from. What are some of the influences they're having on our children? Sometimes we can see it with our eyes. Sometimes we hear it. Sometimes we see our kids changing in certain ways based on who they're spending their time with. I'll give you a quick example, a really weird example. Parents showed up. I was a guidance counselor at Jean Augustine in Brampton. And one parent showed up and was really concerned that her child from grade 9, perfect, normal, everyday, happy-go-lucky kid. Grade 10, they seemed depressed. Hair is growing longer. They're wearing black T-shirts all the time with black jeans. And now they're putting on black nail polish. And she's worried. So I said, well, have you asked your child about who they're hanging out with? And of course, they had gone from one group of friends in grade 9 to another group of friends in grade 10. And they were influenced by the music. They listened to a certain type of music called heavy metal, right, or punk rock, and they decided to change their group of friends as a result, and it completely changed their personality and their level of engagement with school. So we need to have conversations with our kids about how they're being influenced by those around them. I'd also like to mention teachers. Teachers have a huge influence on kids, massive influence on kids. If we are not having conversations with our kids at home, believe me, teachers are having those same conversations with the kids that we should be having. So you can imagine to my surprise when I found that there was a teacher in the school encouraging Muslim kids to have girlfriends and boyfriends, telling me it's not in the Quran. You want to know the identity of the teacher? They're a Muslim. Big problems, right? So we as parents have to have conversations with our kids at home all the time about who is influencing them and how that's affecting their social development. Physical development, I will not spend too much time on except to say this. During COVID, the last 2 years, there had the number one reason why kids were being hospitalized, both male and female, high school age 14 to 17, food eating disorders. And they all developed during COVID. All of it. Took over every other issue of mental health and well-being. So we need to be aware of how we are approaching and how we're developing the relationship with nutrition in our homes. We need to be aware of it as parents and how we're influencing our kids in the home environment and what else is influencing their choices around food, nutrition, and their relationship with it. Intellectual development is probably the most important that we're all concerned about as parents and as young ones, as kids. We want to have strong intellect. We want to be able to get along in the world and be the best we can be and have what we want to have in terms of material items. We want to achieve the highest we want to achieve. That's why we're here. Right? We came with our parents for a reason. When it comes to intellectual development, part of it is part of the education at school, and the other part is schooling at home. How many people here, not to see hands, but how many people here have a library at home? A library of books that your children can access whenever they want to. How many of us take our kids to the library, the public library, on a monthly basis to get new books? Books is a gateway to literature and to mental development, right? To neuroplasticity, for the brain to develop new skills and new ways of thinking. So I would encourage all of us to take a look at how many books are in our home and how often are we all reading. As a parent, I have to remind myself that I should also be reading in front of my kids so they can see the importance of reading and the impact it has on our intellectual development and our cognitive development as well. The better a person reads, so the more a person reads, the better that they can communicate. And communication is the number one skill that we all need to develop, not just us, but worldwide. We're all struggling with communication. We have all these fancy devices to communicate, but very little to say, or not an idea how to articulate those thoughts that we have. Communication is the number one issue that parents often bring up, that I'm not sure how to talk to my kids. My kids don't talk to me. When I speak with teenagers, There are books written to teenager comments about, how to communicate and how they cannot be how they themselves struggle with how to communicate with their friends and how to communicate with teachers or with their parents. So communication is a big area that we have to overcome. And perhaps in a future workshop we can learn about that. Creativity and creative development has a big impact on our character, and this is not necessarily about being an artist. That's not I'm talking about being creative. It's not about like artwork or dramatic play and things like that. Being creative in terms of developing our character really is about learning about ourselves. Learning about ourselves and how we can navigate life. Kids are already creative. Most of you as teenagers who are in this room right now might not be aware how creative you are. But every time you figure out a new way to make notes, a new way to make friends, a new way to talk to a teacher, when you change where you're sitting in the classroom, that's all part of creativity. When you start exploring who you are and try looking at auditory learning, tactile learning, visual learning, that's all part of creativity. Children, if you take a child from the beginning of a grade to the middle of the semester to the end of the semester, you'll find that their multiple intelligences also change. So children are always changing because they're constantly experimenting. We as adults who have grown up, we're not experimenting. We're kind of like set in one place. So when it comes to creativity, we need to create avenues for our children to become creative. Again, I'm not saying about artistry. Let's say, for example, your child is leading Salah in the home. And you give them the opportunity to lead Salah in the home. And perhaps, right now for Salatul Asr, they recite Surah Asr and Surah Ikhlas. And then for Salatul Maghrib, they say Surah Al-Buruj and Surah Ashar. Like they change up what they're reciting. Perhaps in terms of our creativity, how they arrange their room, how they arrange the household, what ideas they might have for household improvement. So all that comes under creative development. Emotional development, I mentioned this a little while ago, but mental health and well-being of our kids, such an important part of our lives, is how do we deal with difficult situations? Is there a problem-solving method? So adults, all the parents here, we already have as adults a hidden, subliminal way of dealing with problems. We know how to deal with problems, we just don't necessarily make it explicit. Teenagers who are here do not have an actual problem-solving model. They're experimenting and exploring. As parents, it's important that we sit with our children and go through some scenarios about some problems that may exist in day-to-day life and how do we overcome them. And we share with our children how we as adults have learned a problem-solving methodology. Right? When I interview teachers, one of the questions is, in life as a teacher, when we work in teams, you're going to get into conflicts. Please explain for me your problem-solving method for working through conflicts and coming to a resolution. It's an actual question I ask in the interviews when I interview teachers and educational assistants. Because I want to see if they have grown up mature enough to handle problems that are happening in the classroom or problems happening in the school. So as parents, as adults, we have this already inside of ourselves. We need to make it explicit and share that with our kids by even sharing examples that we have had. Maybe we had a problem with the customer. Maybe we had a problem with the boss. Maybe we had a problem with a colleague. Bring that home and share with our children how we worked around it, how we worked through that problem and came to resolution. That is a huge part of our emotional development. And finally, of course, is spiritual development, which we've talked about quite a bit. But when it comes to working with our character and our iman, however, it is so important that when we look at our spiritual development, I want to give an example so that it makes a little bit of sense in terms for our teenagers here. One of the best ways to develop character, I said earlier, is getting involved in clubs and sports and so on. But there's a difference. So as parents, we need to work with our kids to help them understand who they are in terms of their personality type. Athletics is competitive. People are competing with each other. In some cases, it brings out the best in people, but more often than not, it brings out the worst in people. The competitive model, it helps people excel, but only 1 or 2 or 3. The rest don't always excel. So a lot of kids become depressed as a result. I didn't make the team. I'm not in the starting lineup. I made the team, but I only scored 2 points today. I suck. I'm not going to go back to practice again. It's so easy to give up in the competitive model. Clubs, on the other hand, is a cooperative model. You work together to solve a problem. The chess club, the Model UN, Student Activity Council, prefects if you have them, or school ambassadors if you have that at your school. right? So these are cooperative models. When you work together as a team, and you learn how to collaborate, you learn how to communicate, and we look at spiritual development, Islam is what model? It's cooperative. So this might be one of the best ways that we as Muslims encourage our kids, right? Newspaper club for that matter as well, it's a good one. There's so many clubs available. And if there isn't a club that exists that you want, teenagers, you can go to your school principal and vice principal and ask for that club. And the responsibility for the principal and vice principal is to find you a teacher sponsor. So this past school year in April, student wanted to do a rocketry club. I found them a teacher who wanted to help them with a rocketry club. Another student wants to start a robotics club. We did a robotics club. We have a checkers club and a chess club, a gaming club, and this a science club. We have a med life club for kids interested in medicine. This is all based on student interest, right? So as students, as young ones, I encourage you to think about what's your passion in life, what makes you happy, what would you like to see in your school, and approach your administrators. Your parents are there to support you, but approach your administrators and start your own club. It looks amazing on university resumes. It looks amazing on job resumes as well if you're looking for a job later on. Because it shows leadership. It shows that you've taken the initiative to do something to make a difference in a positive manner in life. Okay, so we covered our first parts of our triangle. We've covered Iman and character. I've talked a lot about parent agency, which I'll come back to again in a few moments. But now I want to focus on academic excellence in the last few moments now. And there'll be time for question and answer as well. Okay. So one of the biggest questions parents always ask is, where are the marks, right? Where are your grades? What kind of grades are you getting? Where's my child rank? Right? I'm not sure what kind of experiences our teens and tweens have here, but I remember going home sometimes and my father asking me, where's the other 6%? You only got 85, right? Where's the 90? Right? Sometimes we have those conversations too. I see some people smiling. Maybe they have those conversations too with their kids, right? How come so-and-so got, Abdullah got 90%? How come you got 89%? Mariam got, 100%. Why haven't you got 98%? Right? Sometimes we have these conversations with our kids. So, again, times have changed. And if your child was in kindergarten grade 8 and is now coming to grade 9, you may not be familiar with the new reporting system that we have in Ontario when it comes to grading and assessing our students. Okay? In that triangle I just showed you a moment ago, it's the school that evaluates and assesses students and gives them their grades. But how are grades determined? This is so important for us as parents to know. Again, my parents growing up had no idea how marks came up. And most of us just know just a mark on a paper. Sometimes kids themselves don't know where the marks came from. They have no idea what they did wrong or what they did right. In elementary, we use rubrics, but we don't, I'm not sure if some of the teachers even know how to use those rubrics. My school is grade 7 to grade 12. A lot of my time is spent with grade 7 and grade 8 teachers teaching them how to use a rubric. So I know it's difficult for even teachers, this whole assessment system. It started in 2010. You can find the Growing Success document online. Read it, please. Growing Success, you can find it online. You can find the PDF. Please take time to read it. I'm going to break down very quickly what it's all about, how assessment works in Ontario. Why it's so important is because as parents, when we want to advocate for our kids, and kids, when you want to advocate for yourself with your teacher about what your marks you're getting, you have to know how you're being assessed. You have to know how you're being assessed. So, the first part of the assessment model is that there are 4 parts, TAC, T-A-C-K. These are the types of questions that teachers are testing kids on. So knowledge is something that a lot of parents grew up with, multiple choice questions, true and false questions, match the word to the definition, fill in the blank, knowledge-based questions. Memorize something and then just have a brain barf on the paper, right? That's knowledge. Knowledge now counts for only 10% of an assignment or a test. So teachers have been taught to move away from that. So now we're focusing more on communication, short answer questions, where students have an opportunity to demonstrate their learning in a more meaningful manner. This helps a lot when you as a student, you might not know the exact answer, but you can write a few lines until it finally comes back to you and it makes sense, and then you can give a more fulsome answer, and you can get part marks with your communication. And then we have our thinking and application type questions, which are designed to help students be successful where? In university. Because university is all about what? Theoretical study. If kids cannot think by the time they get out of high school, they will not do well in university. Does anybody know the percentage? How many students make it past first year of university in Ontario? Anybody want to guess? 70. Less than 70. 26%. 26% of students make it past first year university. That's why you have 1,000 people taking Psych 101 at Convocation Hall at University of Toronto downtown. By the time you get to fourth year, you've got 10 kids in your class. Right? Only 26% make it through. That's significant. Why? Because students are not being taught to think, which is why this assessment model exists, so that students can now learn how to think, and that should be the emphasis of what happens in our classrooms and in our education, in our testing methods as well, and how to apply that knowledge. Now, how can students demonstrate their knowledge? Okay, so Peel, Toronto, Halton, York, and Durham all have the same model. In Peel, we call it Empowering Modern Learners. And the other boards should have a different name for it. But the idea is that students should have voice and choice on how they demonstrate their learning. So, as a young person, as a student, if taking a written test for an hour is not good for you, it gives you anxiety and panic, you don't do well on tests, you can, with the help of your parent and your guidance counselor, work with your teacher to do a project, to write an essay, to have a presentation with them. You can make a dramatic display if you like to. There are multiple ways to demonstrate one's learning. And we need to know that this is part of the assessment model, that we can work with our teachers to have more than one way of demonstrating our learning. If it's hard for you to stand up in front of the class and give an oral speech because you're nervous, you're going to forget your lines, you can't memorize everything, it's very nerve-wracking, you can work with your teacher to do a one-on-one with no kids around. You can decide to write an essay or do a PowerPoint presentation for them instead. You can do a small video for them. You can work with your teachers to find different alternate methods of learning, right? So conversations, observations, and products, all three elements are used in the evaluation of our students. What does this mean? It means that as a teacher in the classroom, I'm not just looking at marks on a test to determine the final mark for the child. I'm looking at how do they act in the class. When I was walking around listening to the conversations they're having with their peers, or when I was having conversation with them during interviews, were they able to articulate their understanding in a meaningful manner? Do I know that they know what they're talking about? Those are conversations. And observations. Are they becoming the school organized? Are they participating in class? Are they self-regulating, meaning that they're prepared for class, not going every 2 seconds to the washroom, not going on their phone every 2 seconds, not talking to their friend every 2 seconds? Are they actually engaged in the classroom? Are they able to work in a team? Are they able to work independently? Are they able to collaborate and cooperate with others? These are the 6 learning skills that I just mentioned. And these 6 learning skills are all determined by observations, right? Teachers are supposed to be looking and making notes in terms of what students are doing in the classroom environment. I'm sharing this with us so that we as parents can, when you read this document, Michelle, you will, Growing Success, you'll see some examples in the book as to what teachers are looking for when it comes to evaluating. So let's say, for example, at the end, Abdullah, he got like 63% marks-wise, but I know that he's smarter than that. Because every conversation, he knew exactly what he was talking about. Every interview he had, he knew exactly what he was talking about. Maybe the test situation is just not good for him. He's not good at taking tests. So that 63 should be around 75, maybe 78. And as a teacher, I can do that. That's the autonomy I have when it comes to reporting. And that's what the Ministry of Education has done. Because there are several mitigating circumstances. I'll give you another example. A student had 90% at midterm in grade 10 computer science, ended up with a 77%. What happened? Her grandfather died because of COVID. Away for a month. Went back home for the funeral. As a teacher, as an administrator, taking that into account. She missed the final exam as a result of this. Okay, let's go back. And we end up giving her back her 90% because of mitigating circumstances. So if your child is suffering from mental health, if there are things going on at home, speak with your guidance counselor, your child's guidance counselor. Speak with your child's vice principal or principal. Let them know what's going on, because all of that is taken into consideration when it comes to creating a grade for our students. Evaluation. This is so important for us because this is something that I didn't have growing up. There's something called a formative assignment or assessment and a summative assessment. A formative assessment is not worth any marks. So students oftentimes say, well, it's not worth marks, I'm not doing it. So assessment as learning and assessment for learning is where we have peer-to-peer interactions, we have a conversation in the class, we have something called scaffolded learning where we do things together in groups or as a full large group or a small group. And some kids think, well, I don't have to do that. I just have to do the assessment of learning because that's the actual mark. But what kids often lose out on is that when we do the formative tasks, that's where we learn the skills that we need to get 100% on the actual marked assignment. Parents, please support your children in doing those formative assignments. Too often I've had conversations with parents who say, well, it's formative, why am I going to push my kid around to do formative? They just have to do summative. And then I explain to the parents, well, that's why your kid got 50% on the summative, because you didn't help them to do the formative. Formative work matters. You're forming the foundation of skills that will be required to do the summative work. We don't want kids showing up for the exam period for the final project and not know what to do because they didn't do the formative work. So, parents and kids, be aware. The formative work matters. Please do it. I'm talking as an administrator, but more so talking as a counselor, because for 10 years, I had to explain to parents and kids why they are not doing as well as they could have been doing because they weren't not looking at the impact of the formative work that's happening in the classroom. Are there any questions about this? Yep. Formative are the first two. Assessment as learning. So as they're learning, we do a peer-to-peer interaction, they have conversations, peer-to-peer marking. Assessment for learning, they'll do an essay. I'll give them feedback, but no mark. They'll do a math test. There's no grade on it, just some feedback. And then it's preparing them for the actual summative, which is assessment of learning. When they've actually done when we get to so they've done a few assignments. Now it's the essay to do, and then that's the one that actually gets marked. That's the summative.
What grade does this start?
This actually starts from grade 7. But you'll find more so in the high school, grade 9, grade 12. You won't find as much of it in the elementary. Yep.
So, getting the universities, they go to grade 11, grade 12, right? ESPN don't have visibility of percentage, while the universities have a scale of percentage-based approvals. Yeah, sorry.
If you just press pause. I'm going to be finished in about 10 minutes. We're going to come back to that question. Very important question, but let's talk about the end. I'm talking about this one here. If you have questions about this. Any other questions, we'll come back to at the end. Yep.
Jazakallah khair. Thank you. Brother, a lot of stuff that you have mentioned is all, when the students are in school environment, but these days, a lot of students are learning online. So how is that kind of relates to what you're talking about? Can you just maybe touch base on that, online learning aspect of what you're just talking about here?
For sure. So online learning, for the last couple of years, we had online learning. We had hybrid last year. Halton and Peel both and Toronto both, all three of them have an online secondary school, online elementary school, it's an actual school. The same policy applies. Yep, all the same policies apply for online and in-person learning. Online learning, because of the structure of it now, if anybody has a child in the online model, you'll find that teachers are now doing, it's all live. You don't it's not asynchronous, all synchronous learning. All the kids are involved in groups, and there are expectations for being on the online school. So that way the same assessment policy will still apply. Okay. We'll have time for more questions in a moment, inshallah. I'll just have a few more things to go through to talk about how we actually are successful in terms of academic excellence. So, we have in our deen a very basic concept that everything we do with what? Ihsan. And the goal of every student in this room is that we should all be amongst the muhsineen, not only in deen but also in life. Crazy work ethic. This is how we are going to be successful. We have to want to be successful. It should hurt, right, students? It should hurt to want to be successful. We should want to get that 100%. That internal drive, and someone talked about that internal motivation, self-discipline. We need that in order to be successful. Where do we get our inspiration from? I want to give you a few examples. Who's this? I'm hearing some murmuring. Who is this? Come on. This is like one of the most famous people right now. This is Kobe Bryant, right? He died recently, just shortly after retiring from basketball. But he was MVP for how many years running, won how many trophies and so on with his teams. But he had been there for so long, retired and came back, had 2 different numbers he was wearing, 8 and 24, right? He's so well known for his basketball. Crazy work ethic every single day, during season and off season. He would not leave practice until he shot in 400 baskets every single practice. And he'd practice in the off season where people were enjoying life. That's why he's remembered so well. Who was his inspiration? Who's that? Like now the adults are talking, right? the parents know who this is. This is Michael Jordan. You can go on YouTube, and what you're going to find when you type in Kobe Bryant and Michael Jordan, Kobe Bryant mimicked every single move. Every fade shot, every jump shot, every dunk, every deke out, every 4 boxes, every 4 box corners from Michael Jordan. He replicated him because Michael Jordan is one of the greatest basketball players of all time. Who was the greatest basketball player of all time, by the way? Not Jordan. He's apart from, no, not LeBron James. Come on. The only GOAT for us as Muslims is who? Thank you, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. You have to be a bit older to know that name, I guess. So Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. Till today, he has so many of these records that no one's ever been able to meet, right? Even Will Chamberlain couldn't catch him. In fact, last year during the finals, they were showing some stats, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar's lifetime points, and they added up, I think it was like 7 of the top team points, and they couldn't match his score. That's how high his records are, mashallah. So very, very well known. But Michael Jordan was one of the greats. Kobe Bryant saw that, mimicked every move, and became just as great as Michael Jordan himself. Who's this? We all know who he is, right? In fact, when you think about boxing as a sport, you only think of 2 people, really. This guy, and who else? Muhammad Ali. So who was his mentor, do you think? Muhammad Ali. Mike Tyson's mentor was Muhammad Ali. And if you look at Mike Tyson's boxing, who does it mimic? Muhammad Ali. Muhammad Ali's last fight was with who? No, it was Larry Holmes. Who was Mike Tyson's first fight with? Larry Holmes. And what did he do to him? Destroyed him. Who was in the front row? Muhammad Ali. Right? That was his gift to his mentor. What I'm trying to demonstrate here is that crazy work ethic. You want to know how this man, Muhammad Ali, was dominating. There's a movie called When We Were Kings. It's a documentary about Muhammad Ali's fight against George Foreman. When We Were Kings. If you haven't watched it, watch it. Find it online. And you'll learn about how this man became so entrenched in society that he's been dead for how many years and people still remember his name with love and affection and respect. Doesn't matter what religion or where we come from in the world. Who's this guy? He didn't come out of nowhere. How did he become so famous and so wealthy? Crazy work ethic. How hard has this guy had to work to be where he is today? This person with a single tweet can either make markets or destroy markets. What happened to Bitcoin with this guy? Bitcoin's going to be the best thing this year. Jumps up from 30,000 to 75,000 in a week. I'm not going to Bitcoin, going down. Dogecoin, what happened to Bitcoin? 75 down to 25. Right? 2 tweets. That's how powerful he is. Right? Crazy work ethic. If you type in Will Smith, crazy work ethic, you'll see a video about him talking about his crazy work ethic. He hasn't made all the best films in the world, but people know him more than most other actors in the world. People know his name. They don't recognize he's made a contribution to cinematography. And if anybody's from Philadelphia, you know that he made a difference to people living in Philadelphia, which is his hometown. How long has this guy been around? 1970s. And still today he's making movies. Still today he's a multi-billion-dollar box office hit because of his acting ability. Why? Crazy work ethic. So, we have to strive to be amongst the muhsineen, those who do everything in life with ihsan. These people we see in life have worked hard because they have an internal drive that makes them want to succeed. I invite all of us, the teenagers here today, all the students, to find a role model in your life. Could be your parents, could be a sibling, could be an extended family member, could be someone in society. Find somebody if you know or aware of who has that crazy work ethic and mimic them, just like others have done. Fathers and mothers, demonstrate your crazy work ethic to your children, because your children would not be here in this masjid right now, here today, if not for your crazy work ethic. Children, your parents have worked extremely hard to get where they are today in life. You would not be here with them today right now if they did not have strong, crazy work ethic. Find out what that looks like for them. What does it sound like in their mind? Look at how hard they're working. Look at how much hours they're giving to their job, how many hours they're giving to their families, how many hours they're giving to you as young ones, how much love and care, respect they have for you as young people that they are accountable for in this life and the next. Right? Learn from them. And parents, let us teach our children exactly what we're doing in our work ethic as well. Studying starts with the learning environment. When we want our children to study, and when teenagers want to study, you need to have a place in the house, a quiet, clean place to study. If you have a clean place, you're going to have a clean mind by which to study, to approach whatever you're doing that day. If you have a cluttered study area, a cluttered mind, what are you going to do? Right? You're not going to be able to find your desk or your computer, let alone your bed probably in this kind of a picture. All right? Nutrition. I mentioned this a while ago around physical development. Nutrition is so important. I was doing, when I was a special education department head, I was doing cognitive testing on kids who we had concerns about. And this one child had gotten 100% on all of the sections until it got to the last one. So I asked the child, what happened? They hadn't eaten. So I got them a meal, they came back and got 100% in the last one. Right? When we have hydration, our brains function. When we have good nutrition, our brains function. I'm guilty of having chocolate bars and donuts and ice cream too, right? I got the proof, okay? But for ourselves and for our families, we should do our best to have whatever possible good, healthy nutrition we can have for them. And for young people, I encourage you, yes, have chocolate bars and whatever. Okay, maybe I shouldn't advertise that. Eat healthy as much as possible, right? But choose wisely when we eat and when we snack, so that when we're ready to study, we are actually mentally ready to study. And hydration is very important. That's not me. Somebody else. Okay, but I'm bringing this up because this is an often issue of contention between students and parents at home. Can you listen to music and study at the same time? Parents will say, no. Kids will say, yeah. When I was young, I used to listen to music when I was studying, okay? So, we were all young once, we've all been there. Your parents were also young once, and they probably did the same thing as well, okay? So yes, it is possible to listen to music, but first of all, every household is different in terms of what kind of music you're listening to, right? Whether you're listening to Nasheeds, Quran, or you're listening to other sorts of music, that's a family decision. When it comes to music, what I'm going to suggest is if you are into listening to music, you have to be careful the type of music you choose. Because if you choose music where you know the lyrics of what's being recited or sung, you're just going to fall right into that rhythm, and you're going to start doing it too. You'll not be able to concentrate on your work. You'll be reciting and humming along with the tune of the music or the recitation. So what you do is you take one short surah or a 5-minute clip of a nasheed or a song, whatever you're listening to, and put it on loop. Those who are into music, if you go on YouTube, you type a 1-hour loop, you'll see all sorts of 1-hour loops out there. Why? Because when you choose a short clip, repeat it over and over and over again, the mind numbs to it. It becomes white noise. And then you're able to concentrate. Okay? So if you're into listening to music, or in the Nasheed or Quran, that would be my humble suggestion to you, so that you do not get caught in this thing where you're actually not able to concentrate. I have a student right now, just entering grade 9. They have an individual education plan. They have a learning difficulty. On the IEP, it says they have to listen to music when doing a test. Like that's how detrimental it could be. But if you're driving a car, and we've done this as adults, perhaps you've seen your parents do this, you're driving a car, the radio is on, you're looking for a house number, what do? You turn the music, you turn the volume down, because you need to be able to concentrate. So as young people, know yourselves. Work with your parents to know yourself. Maybe there's a certain type of assignment, you can have something playing in the background, but when you have to sit down and do a test or write an essay or work on a project, you need to turn everything off and focus. But if it's something maybe like drawing or coloring a map in grade 9 geography, fine. But if you're preparing for a geography test, maybe there's no music during that time. Just focus with complete silence. There's an app called Coffeetivity. It's all about white noise. They've recorded the sound of a coffee shop in like 10 different countries, right? And it's just background noise. And they put it on a loop, a 5-minute loop. So it numbs the brain. So if you really desperately need something, and you know music is not the best choice for you, this might be an app you consider getting. I'm not sure if it's still, you should have like 5 free and 5 you have to buy. I'm not sure, not used for a while. But this is an example of apps that you can use. Okay. Along with a learning environment is making sure we actually have learning utensils. This is part of school preparedness. Have an organized desk with notebooks, pens, pencils, highlighters, stapler, ruler, tape, glue, whiteout or correction tape, and a binder with maybe inserts. Organize yourselves as students. Parents, help your children become organized. Show them how to take a piece of paper, put in the 3-hole punch, and punch the paper and put in the binder. It's not a skill we teach in school. I'm being serious. We don't teach that in school. Teach your children how to do this. Teach your children how to put pens and pencils into a pencil case, because we don't teach this in school. Teach your kids how to have a notebook, how to put their name on it, how to put the subject on it, where to keep it in their backpack, because we don't teach that in school. Show your kids that when they get something from the teacher, immediately put it in the binder so it stays nice and fresh when it goes home, rather than being crumpled and thrown in the backpack and people forget it's there. Because we don't teach those skills in school. We don't teach organizational skills like this in school. We don't. So please teach it at home. Show our kids how to be organized. Show them how to use these utensils to be organized and remain organized. And the agenda book. We don't teach kids how to use an agenda book in school, but children need to have an agenda book. From the time of grade 9 to the rest of our lives, we should have an agenda book. As parents, share your agenda books. I hope you have one. Share your agenda books with your children so they can learn how important the agenda book is and how to use it. Some of us use our phones, which is fine. And some of us might have more than one calendar. I share with my students when I was in the classroom, I have a personal calendar, a school calendar for the school, then I have a board calendar, and then I have a weekly schedule. And I would share this with my students so they could see that how much organization is required to be successful in life. So if you don't already have one, start with the family calendar. Put it in the kitchen or the front foyer where everybody looks at it. So people start to understand how to organize your social calendar as a family. Who's going where, when. You come to the masjid this day or that day or the following day. Add these to the calendar. And then sit with your children and show them how to use the agenda. And for our teenagers, please be open to using the agenda, whether it's the electronic agenda, Google Calendar if that's what you prefer, Outlook Calendar, or a physical hard copy agenda. Okay. Structure time. And this is actually also in your handout. So here's what structure time is all about. When we're at school, period 1, 8:30, you're in class. Period 2, 9:45, you're in class. Period, then you have lunch at 11 o'clock or something. Around 1 o'clock, you're back in period 3, maybe 12:30, you're back in class, right? 1:45, then you go to period 4, and then you go home. Are there any bells ringing at home to tell you what period it is? No. Is there any a bell going off? I don't think it's dinner time? No. We have structured time at school, but when we come home, there's no structured time. So in your worksheet here, I've given you an example of structured time after school, so that you see, right, on this little chart here, that 3 o'clock you come home, from 3 o'clock to 4 o'clock, maybe you take a nap, maybe you have a snack, you relax a little bit, then 4 o'clock to 5 o'clock, you work on period 1 homework. 5 o'clock to 6 o'clock, you have dinner. 6 to 7, you work on period 2 homework. 7 to 8, you work on period 3 homework. 8 to 9, you work on period 4 homework. An hour for video games, social media feed, and then you go to sleep by 11. I'm just giving you an example. But the idea is to structure time at home. So when we talk about that crazy work ethic, every single day you're doing something for your school when you come home. Right? We can't come home and just watch TV all night. I've done that. It doesn't work. It doesn't help us become successful. Okay? But as a student, create a schedule at home with parental input and parental support. Structuring our time at home. And then we have something called the Seinfeld method. Everybody know who Seinfeld is? This guy was making $1 million an episode, right back in the 90s. That's how successful he was at that time. And he's still successful till today. He has the new show on Netflix, I think it's called Driving Around a Car with Comedians or something like that. So he has something called the Seinfeld method. And what he has a calendar. And the goal is that every single day, he writes down at least one new joke. And the idea is, don't break the chain. That's how he has become so successful in his life. He's been doing it for years. So I invite all of our teenagers, get a calendar, and every single day mark off, I reviewed my period 1 notes, period 2 notes, period 3 notes, period 4 notes, and do that every single day and don't break the chain. Crazy work ethic, right? Get down to business, be organized, and give that to yourself every single day. This is called the Seinfeld method on how to be successful. When it comes to taking notes, no one teaches anybody how to take notes. We don't teach this in school. So in your, this is an example here. I think it's the last page of your worksheets. You'll find it there as well as an example template I've given there. Okay. So Cornell University is one of the top universities in the world, and they teach this to all of their students. Right? So every first year student, for the first 10 minutes of a class on their first day, they learn how to make notes. And you take your piece of paper and you divide it into 3 sections. In the main section, number 1, this is where you make all of your notes in class. If you're reading a book, you make notes over there. If you're reviewing a passage that the teacher has told you to read for that's homework or for the next day, you make all of your notes there in number 1. On the side column, after you've done all that work of making notes and making diagrams and so on, number 2 is on the side. On the left-hand column, you write down questions, like things that you're still wondering about, like what does this even mean? The water cycle, what does that even, what is H2O really, right? Whatever it is you're learning about. Water cycle is part of grade 9 science, right? So, you might write down questions you have, things that are still rolling around that you don't know, questions you want to ask the teacher the very next day in class. And the bottom, number 3, is a summary of everything you've learned on that unit in your own words. Why in your own words? Why is it not sufficient to do what we did as parents, which is just copy the textbook 100 times so you can memorize it? Why does it have to be in your own words? What? Go ahead. So you understand it. So you can actually consolidate it in your own mind. Because when it comes to the test, unless you have literally a photographic memory where you can recall the textbook page in front of your brain and regurgitate everything, you're going to go blank when you come to the test. Because you can't memorize someone else's words and then expect to remember them on the test. But you'll remember your own words. How do the Hufad memorize Quran other than constantly reciting? In Ramadan, what do? They write it down. They actually write it down, right? All the scholars, like my teachers in Islam, they actually literally write it down, and always in the month of Ramadan, right? So write it down in your own words, right? Write down what you want to learn in your own words so you will remember it. It will become part of who you are. Something you remember for years and years to come. I still remember xylem and phloem. Anybody know what xylem and phloem is? Anybody taking grade 12 biology? No? Okay. All right. Self-advocacy. This is a huge part of success, and so many of us do not take advantage of it. Teachers want their students to succeed. Teachers want their children to get 100%. That's what teachers actually want to see happen in class. If you, as a student, are not understanding something, please raise your hand and ask for help. Go and see the teacher before school, at lunchtime, or after school. Teachers have a duty in the Education Act under duties of teacher to support students. So teachers are there for you. All you have to do is raise your hand or go and see them during lunch hour. They will make time for you. And if they don't, that's when you go to the principal's office. But they will make time for you because that's part of their job. It's actually their job description. Okay, that's for students. The last thing I want to mention here, I'm kind of running out of time, so I will not show the video. I'm just going to go through what do parents do. What do parents do to help their children be successful? So this is last year. Caught a child for doing plagiarism. Brought him down. Called the father. The father walked in. He says to me, "Do you know how long I worked on the essay for?" This happens. Don't do your child's homework for them. They will get caught. They will be called plagiarism. They will get a 0. It is actually against the school code of conduct. You can be suspended for plagiarism. Okay. Communicate with teachers. All teachers have access to email. Learn who your child's teachers are. Email them. in the first week, first couple of weeks, email them. Get to know who they are. I'm the father of Abdullah, or the mother of Abdullah, and I'd like to get to know you. Hope things are well. Let me know when I give you a call, or whatever you want to do. Just have a quick introduction email so they know that you're there and that you are a partner in education. You're there to support your child. Teachers like it. Believe it or not, teachers like it when they have an engaged parent. Because the worst thing that happens in the teacher's life is at the end of the semester comes, and there's been no communication home, and Abdullah comes home with a 65, and the parent loses their mind. They can't do anything at that time. It's the end of the semester. Sorry, it's done. Right? And as a parent, you can't do anything about it either. So, get to know your children's teachers from the very beginning of the school year. Replicate the environment. If your child is being successful at school, find out what's happening at school that's helping them be successful and do it at home. If your child is being successful at home, let your teachers know this is how they're studying at home. Can you please provide them the same environment at school? Take time, as I mentioned, growing success. Someone asked about the curriculum documents. Find them online. Ask the teacher for a copy of the textbook or buy one if you need to. They're not that expensive. And that way you can have access to the actual text or resources that are happening in class so you can keep on top of what's happening and be there to support your child. Check in with your child every single day. The Seinfeld method I mentioned for kids, as parents, it belongs to us as well. Seinfeld method for parents. Did you check in with your kid today? Cross it off on your calendar. Right? Don't break the chain. Every single day, check in with them. And literally being present. You don't have to actually sit with them and do their homework, but if they're sitting in the room doing their homework, sit with them. Sit on the floor outside of the room if you have to. Just be in the vicinity, or just be available. So if they need you, they know that you're there. Right? Be available for them when they get stuck with their homework. And join the school council. The school council meets 4 times a year. It starts in October. You don't have to be the chair of the school council, but attend the meetings, become part of the conversations of what's happening in school, learn what's going on, and see if you can lend a hand. At the very least, you're engaged and you're aware of what's happening around you. And if you don't have this at your school already, ask the principal of your school to set up a parent affinity group for Muslim parents. I have it at my school. It's a separate venue than the school council, where a Muslim, a group for almost like an MSA, but for parents, where they can directly speak to the principal or the vice principal about the concerns that they may have in the building and what they feel that the school needs to do better or more for the support of their Muslim kids and to stamp out Islamophobia and racism. As I mentioned at the beginning, Islamophobia is mentioned by name in the ministry report. Principals are aware of it. Okay? So if you would like to set this up, whatever school your children are going to, call up your principal and say, can we please have a Muslim, an affinity group for Muslim parents? You say affinity group because the word affinity group is in the Human Rights Code. It's in the Human Rights Code, okay? So you can have it. They have to provide it. So a parent affinity group for Muslim parents. Meet once or twice a year with the principal. Maybe it's just at the beginning of the year and second semester, whatever you want to do, but set that up so that you as a parent feel that you are supporting the identity. Remember we talked about Iman and characters, 2/3 of success. Schooling, right? Making a life for themselves. And then, of course, academics is a living. The video is just to report everything I just said. I have given you homework in your worksheets. Please take time to work through diligently. I've given you my email address on the worksheet in case you need support later on. And then there's a QR code for a survey that the Masjid would like for you to complete before we have Salat al-Asr at 6 o'clock. And now I have time for some questions. So where's the brother who had that question earlier? He's got the microphone.
Yeah, I'll give it a microphone.
Assalamu alaikum. Thank you very much for your time. Really appreciate what you've given information. My question is on behalf of parents who are in grade 11 and 12. Right? Universities have like a cutoff in terms of percentage. I don't have that visibility for my grade 12 student. It's only that he's grading an E and they have some codes. So how can I get access to what percentage is he in? Like to be eligible for universities is going into next year or so.
So the brother's asking that for reporting time. So we have something called the progress report card. The progress report card will come out in October, and that just has E, G, S, and N. That's just a general report card. But the midterm report card, which will hit in mid-November, I think this year's November 14th or 21st of the date, that will have the percentage on there. But at any time you want to have a percentage or you want to know how your child is doing, call the teacher, email them saying, it's been a month, where's my kid at? I see the E on the progress report card, but Does that mean 80? Does it mean 90? Does it mean 100? Ask them, right? Make sure you're always in contact with them to know what's going on for that. When it comes to cutoffs for universities, it changes every year. But at the end of this month, there's something called the Ontario University Fair. The Ontario University Fair happens at the Convention Centre in downtown Toronto. Friday, Saturday, Sunday. Go. If your child's in grade 11 or grade 12, go. Right? And learn from all the recruitment and admissions officers are there. Waterloo sometimes actually brings their professors. The deans of some faculties are there as well. So if you're not aware of this, go with your kids. Even if they're in grade 9, 10, if you really want to go, go. I don't encourage that because kids get freaked out. But grade 11 and grade 12, take them down. Check with your school as well. Sometimes schools actually offer the fair at the location. So my school, we're having in October, all the universities come to our school, just for the convenience of parents. But so to check with your school if they have the same thing. If not, go down to the Metro Convention Center last weekend in September.
Assalamu alaikum, brother.
Assalaam.
Quick question. Do the Catholic school boards also have like similar policies? Like my daughter is going into grade 9 at Catholic school.
Yep. So the question about Catholic schools, do Catholic schools have the same policies they do? Everything I mentioned here is for publicly funded schools. The Catholic school system is a publicly funded school. If your kid's going to grade 9 or grade 10 for the Catholic school system, they have to take the religions course. It's a compulsory course. Grade 9, grade 10, they teach about Christianity. Grade 11, grade 12 is about world religions. There is an opt-out for certain sections of it, though. You have to see if they offer that at your Catholic school. If not, if your child is going to a Catholic school, please debrief with them every single day when they have their course in Christianity so that you can dismantle, debunk things that they are saying. At one school called St. Joseph's in Mississauga, instead of calling it Muslims, they were calling them Mohammedans. Yes, they're actually calling them Mohammedans because they want to disgrace Muslims and show that they're committing shirk by worshipping Muhammad ibn al-Sallam. So it's important to know what the kids are being taught and to be able to disrupt that and to actually challenge that. The Catholic school system can support MSA, they can support Salah, they can support Jummah because it is all in the Human Rights Code, which supersedes any other policy that they may have. And I've actually worked in Brampton with a group of kids to set one up in Brampton. So you can definitely do that. Okay.
There's one more question here. Before I see a lot of families leaving, can you please leave the clipboards back? And we still have a few important questions, so appreciate it if everyone can stay till the end. So one more question here, brother.
Assalamu alaikum, brother. It's
Welcome,
a very
Sam.
informative lecture. I just want to ask you two things. One, you were talking about the crazy work ethic, but nowadays all the kids, they want instant,
Gratification.
Achievement, gratification. So how we encourage our kids, especially for high school students, they are teenagers. It's not easy to.
So I'll answer that question first. First question is about instant gratification versus crazy work ethic. The reason I gave the examples of the people on the board is for us to understand and for kids themselves to develop a relationship with a mentor who has that crazy work ethic, because they will see through that mentor how long it takes for things to actually be acquired and to be achieved. And one way of starting that conversation is as parents demonstrating that and showing that over a period of time. I'll give you a small example. In my own family, I'll share my example. I mentioned that my father started on the floor, working in the factory, became manager of the company, but he went through stages. So I have his business card from every stage. And I share that with my own kids to show them. It took him X number of years to get there. But you work hard and eventually you achieve. You work harder, you achieve more, right? And so it's about showing role models in life so they can see how long it takes for something to truly actually happen. And the reason I gave those examples is because kids all know who they are. Right? So it might be people in your own family as well. Personally, my mentor was a family friend who, instead of going to medical school, he was so smart to make him teach the medical students at medical school, right? So I was able to connect with him, mashallah, and benefit from his strength and learn from him about how to be successful.
And one quick question.
Yep.
As you talk about you have to communicate with the teacher in the beginning of the year and email, sometimes it's hard to communicate. They don't reply. Not all the teachers, even you call, they don't show up. You leave the message, and when they, when you call them and ask about the kids, there is nothing like anything wrong, but they just talk very formally. Yeah, everything is all right. So how we communicate in a good way to, nudge them or.
Thank you. Great question. When we speak with our teachers, sometimes two things happen. They don't reply, or number two, when you speak to them, the response is like, oh, they're doing great. Thank you for calling in. That's it. If they don't respond to the email or to the call, go to the vice principal, go to the principal. They have a duty. That's actually, if you look at the Education Act, duty of a teacher. Look it up in the section D or section G. It says, must maintain communication with parents. So they have a duty. So if it's not happening, go to the vice principal, the principal, administrators, or the boss. We will make sure that they do get in touch with you. Number two, the question about the response is not like fulfilling. When you want to have a conversation with teachers about how your child is doing, be very specific. They had this test. They got 71%. What are they missing? What do I need to tell their tutor? What do I need to do to support them to make sure they get 100% next time? They got their assignment or their work on their assignment. I think they did a great job. What do you think? Where is their gaps? So be very specific with them so they can give you specific feedback. Even if it was a formative assessment and they get it back and there's all these comments all over it, sit down with your child. If something you don't understand, call the teacher and ask them to explain what those comments mean. Right? So be specific in your conversations with them rather than just saying, how's my kid doing? So that's how I can suggest that you connect with them on a deeper level. So good question. Sometimes teachers get their knickers or not because you talk with the vice principal. Doesn't matter. You have to remember, I showed you that triangle for a reason. Parents have agency. Parents have power. If the teacher jumps, oh my gosh, the vice principal is calling because the parent called my vice principal. Well, I better now, when I speak with teachers, I tell them, you have a duty. If I find out that you have not responded to the email or call of this parent or any other parent, you will be getting a letter of expectation. There's a disciplinary method. So don't be afraid. Forgive my language here, but this is what white people sometimes think. These are immigrants. Who cares about them? Nothing's going to happen. They can't even speak any English. Then they get someone like me in charge. Changes, right? So I'm saying to you, you have power. You have power. You have agency as a parent. It's in the Education Act that governs the profession in this province. You have rights under human rights. Make sure you make use of them. If you're having difficulty, you have my email address. You can call NCCM, National Council of Canadian Muslims. They support parents all the time. They got a call just last week about a bullying incident in Peel. I got the call to find out what's happening at that school. So you have agency, one and then two. Thank you. Guidance counselors, engage with them as from the first day. Just reach out to them, email, I'm the mother of so-and-so, I'm the parents of so-and-so. Just want to make the connection. So that if you need them in the future, they'll be there. They'll remember who you are. You just have to email them and say, guidance counselors are there for course selection, career help, and if your child is having mental health difficulties. Or if you just don't know who to ask for help at school. Something's happening, you know what's going on, contact the guidance counselor. Guidance counselors are like pseudo-admin. Sometimes they know more than what's happening at the school than even the principal does. Right? So it's worthwhile.
Assalamu alaikum.
Welcome, Sam.
So my question is more with regards to parental involvement. So I'm a mom of boys, and with contrast, it's a bit difficult motivating them in the sense. However, there's a fine line between getting them annoyed to reminding them constantly on what they need to do. What's a good balance where you're still their friend without being the bad guy? You know?
Good question. So sometimes our kids are not as reactive as we want them to be. Sometimes we get pushback. So it's very important for us for a couple of things. How do you engage with your kids in a way that's meaningful, that you maintain a level of respect, but you're also able to push them along as well. I think every child is different. You're going to want to know, you're going to want to treat each of your kids differently. If you have multiple kids in the same household, each child's personality is different. Some are more willing to work, others you get more pushback on. So know your kids first. That's the first part. Second, the reason I asked for the kids to be here today is so they can hear what you're hearing. So they now know that the parents have a responsibility, and their responsibility is to help their parents fulfill that responsibility. So as a parent, it's important that you have the relationship with your child. Build a relationship so that they know that you're there to support them in whatever capacity that they need. And oftentimes children don't know what they don't know. So as a parent, we're there to help them understand or to learn what they actually don't know. So that's part of it. Then when you have these certain strategies with your kids, rather than you being the one that pushes, you can say, for example, here's the Seinfeld calendar. Did you do your period 1 homework, period 2, 3, 4 homework? Check it off. Now you have a third point. It's not you who's the bad guy, it's Seinfeld. Right? So using a third point as an example. Hope that helps, inshallah, a little bit. 1 and then 2, yep.
Can we use reciting surah, nasheed, and songs in the same sentence? Like,
No, I was just mentioning that because every family is different. So some people listen to music, some people don't. Some people listen to sheet, some people don't. Some people listen to the Quran. I don't know, it's up to you. I'm just giving examples of what I'm not trying to advocate that music is something which is good.
because if we do some research on music, we can find out how bad.
Yeah, I'm not going to. I'm not. It's not a class on fiqh. I'm not going to talk about the fiqh of music, what's halal, haram. That's up to you. So I'm just trying to give the example of that. We can talk later, inshallah.
So at my school, during one of my quizzes, we had a test, and so the teacher, she corrected it, and she corrected one of the questions wrong, and me and a bunch of some of my peers went to correct her about it, and the next time we had a test, right, so we gave the test, and prior to correcting the test, she mentioned that she corrected the test lightly, and if we went to her and asked her to correct it, or came to her with a question about the test, she would correct it really hard.
So the question is about what happens when you're dealing with. Okay, this is the last one. The last question for now. Question: sometimes our kids are trying to self-advocate, and they're having some dispute with the teacher, and the teacher is being disparaging or not being helpful. In those types of situations, go to the parents. Parents connect with the teacher, connect with the guidance counselor, connect with the vice principal and the principal in that order. Start with the teacher, go to the guidance counselor, go to the vice principal, then go to the principal. Go in that order. And that's what parents are for. I'm glad that you use your self-advocacy skills, but sometimes it doesn't work. Go to your parents for that support, inshallah. Jazakallah khairan. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
We're going to have